second straight day, the January 6th committee investigating the insurrection at the Capitol has issued a fresh batch of subpoenas. And some of the biggest names from former President Trump's inner circle are on the list. It includes the former White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, and the former president's senior advisor, Stephen Miller. McEnany was reportedly with Mr. Trump as he watched the January 6th attack unfold on television. And congressional investigators say Miller played a key role in pushing state legislatures to overturn the election results.
The January 6th committee is zeroing in on Donald Trump's inner circle, issuing subpoenas today for close advisors who spent the most time with him in the White House, who saw and heard what he did right before and during the Capitol riot. John McEntee, who at just 29 years old, became one of Trump's most powerful and fiercely loyal aides. And Molly Michael, his personal secretary, who sat right outside the Oval Office.
At least 35 subpoenas overall have been issued so far, but will any of the people testify?
Now, this is another example, Georgia. It really parallels the Rittenhouse case quite well, if you ask me, because we see the hubris and how far these people can get with a system of justice that we never get to experience as black people. These subpoenas are all but being ignored. And the question is how far and how long will they be able to ignore them? And I just can't think of many circumstances that many people other than the elite, the wealthy, the rich, the connected, the conservative, these Republicans, the president's inner circle, quite frankly, could get away with simply ignoring subpoenas from Congress.
You know, I just keep thinking about the caucasity of folks doing what they did on January 6th and contrasting that to Election Day, was it 2020? When you had 646 people arrested on a highway in Minneapolis. They didn't have transportation for 646 people. They didn't even have 646 handcuffs. But somehow they found a way on site to arrest 646 people to send a message that they were tired of the protesting that had been happening here for months after the murder of George Floyd, to send a message to protesters to not take the highway and an intimidation tactic. And so if you could think of, city, state law enforcement working together to apprehend 646 people and issue tickets on site they had to come up with a system in that moment on how to process more than 600. It was the largest arrest that has ever happened in Minnesota. And how come that wasn't the strategy, the tactic, the approach to the insurrectionists? Why are we here months later trying to go through footage and identify people and subpoena people across multiple state lines and difference? Do you know how complicated this has become and how many different federal and state resources are being used to track these people down? And then not to mention, like you said, folks are ignoring their subpoenas. And so how much resources are we going to deploy into tracking people down and forcing them to show up in court? And and will they testify, right? How come they weren't arrested on site? How come citations weren't given out on January 6th?
Right. I think that is so critical, right? I think it's honestly because the system knows whose side it is on. When we cover these protests, we often see the police officers have their batons facing us and their backs facing white supremacy. Look at every protest, look at every interaction. The police always have their back to the Nazis and the white supremacists. I think that happens, Georgia, because they know whose side they are on. I think it's time for us to get to be familiar with that reality as well. The federal judge has rejected Donald Trump's play to block documents from being given to the January 6th committee. Now, this has already filed notice of an appeal, but it still has to go to a court order stopping the documents from going to Congress. Here's a second clip. Here's another breakdown from Rachel Maddow.
A federal judge tonight has just ruled on former President Donald Trump's attempt to try to keep documents from his time in the White House out of the hands of the investigation in Congress into the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Last month, Trump filed a lawsuit against the January 6th investigation, as well as the National Archives, which holds on to all presidential documents. The lawsuit aimed to prevent the National Archives from handing over Trump White House documents and records to the investigation. The suit argued that those documents were protected by executive privilege and they must be shielded from the investigators. In reality, the person who actually gets to assert that something is protected by executive privilege is not a former president, but the current president. And President Biden's White House counsel's office reviewed the documents in question and said, actually, no, these are not privileged documents at all. These can be given to the investigation. This federal judge has issued her ruling on that lawsuit, and she has summarily rejected Donald Trump's attempt to shield these documents from the January 6th investigation in Congress. Quote, the plaintiff does not acknowledge the deference owed to the incumbent president's judgment, meaning President Biden, who waived executive privilege on these documents. Quote, his position that he may override the express will of the executive branch appears to be premised on the notion that his executive power exists in perpetuity. But presidents are not kings, and plaintiff is not president. The court holds that the public interest lies in permitting the combined will of the legislative and executive branches to study the events that led to and occurred on January 6th, and to consider legislation to prevent such events from ever occurring again. This ruling says, in effect, that Trump's assertion of privilege is bogus and that there is a strong and legitimate public interest in these documents being given to the investigation. Trump has filed a notice that he intends to appeal this ruling to the D.C. Appeals Court, barring any movement on that. With this ruling from this judge tonight, all the documents that the investigation is seeking are now expected to be turned over to the January 6th investigation by the end of this week.
Now, we wanted to play as much as we did because there's so much context there that it was summarized very succinctly. Here's a critical thing. Donald Trump is trying to assert an executive privilege that he no longer has because he's not president of the United States. While this portion of the story is very, very important, I want everyone to focus on something else, though. If he's behaving like this out of power, consider the fact that they have a full mobilization to try to get him back in power in 2024. So let's consider what he would do if he ever got back in power.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a real question to ask. And, as I just reflect on January 6th altogether, Trump's role, what he's doing now, what it brings up for me, Ben, is there are two fundamentally different concepts of the criminal justice system. For people who participated in January 6th, who broke out windows at the Capitol, who stormed into the offices of people in Congress, who broke the law, they are still innocent until proven guilty. Mm-hmm. But for people who look like you and I, we are guilty until proven innocent. And so I keep coming back to that, is just how different this is being handled because of the type of people who were involved and the type of people who broke the law. And so I am not surprised that their ringleader, while he is no longer in office, is still trying to make this system work for him. But I think he has gone beyond what even the craziest Republican, the craziest person on the right would ever go. And so a lot of people are not standing behind him anymore because they see just how dangerous he is and how far he's willing to go.
I'm afraid there's not enough of those. I think this is that's an important point. Where this Republican Party goes from here is so critical, but all indications from my best estimation, these people are just going to fall over and capitulate to Donald Trump because, well, he's the biggest bully in a room full of bullies.
I hope not. But you might be right, and the reason why
I hope I'm wrong too. I hope I'm wrong.
If Donald Trump is reelected, I really don't know what the future of our nation looks like. I don't know if we'll have a nation. I mean, at that point, would it be safe to say that we're moving in the place of having a dictatorship? because what he has shown to us, you know, he might get in there and try to change the law that a president can only serve 2 terms, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's something to definitely think about.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I was just going to say here's a more terrifying notion to me is the approval rating of the president right now and the vice president and the performance of the Congress, because all roads are leading to exactly that, Georgia. The performance of this Congress and the performance of the president is, I mean, it's abysmal when we consider the threat on the other side of it. And so we needed a White House that was getting stuff done, but instead we have a White House that is, you know, still trying to appease, you know, Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema, all while Donald Trump is lurking in the background, ready to seize that kind of power you're talking about.
Yeah, there's got to be some serious organizing that happens in order to counter the campaign that Trump is going to roll out. And I don't know who that person is. I definitely don't think that person is Joe Biden. Joe Biden has shown that he's, you know, so conservative on issues that are important to the Black community, and he's not willing to go up against the status quo in a Democratic Party. You know, so here we are. We do have some time to figure it out, but this is a serious question that we need to start asking ourselves, because Trump did a lot of damage while he was in office.
That's right. That's right. And I think they're coming back to finish the job. And if we don't govern ourselves accordingly, if we don't carry ourselves accordingly and engage in rhetorical combat, political combat, I mean, these people are playing for keeps. They want the entirety of our democracy. And it's not overestimating it or overstating it, rather, to say that these people dream of what we have a nightmare of. That Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood, that is their dream. And that's something that we're fighting against.